The pyramids of Caral, the civilization that shouldn't exist. There are places on Earth that whisper instead of shout. Places that refuse to reveal themselves fully, as if waiting for the right moment or the right set of eyes to understand what they truly are. Caral is one of those places. If you walked through the Supe Valley of coastal Peru centuries ago, you'd see a landscape that looked silent, ordinary, almost forgettable. But buried beneath that silence was a story older than nearly every civilization we celebrate. A story that took thousands of years to resurface. And when it finally did, it challenged everything we thought we knew about human intelligence. Caral isn't a city built on myth. It isn't an invention of storytelling. It isn't propped up by legends of gods or supernatural origin. Its power doesn't come from imagination. It comes from evidence. Hard, measurable, scientific evidence. And that's exactly what makes it so unbelievable. The pyramids of Caral are more than 5,000 years old. That alone is easy to say, but the reality of it sinks in slowly. 5,000 years, older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge. And yet, somehow, the builders of Caral had the knowledge, patience, and scientific instinct to design a city that feels strangely modern even today. But let's start where any good story starts, with the moment someone finally realized what Caral truly was. For hundreds of years, farmers walked over these mounds of earth without knowing what they stood upon. The desert wind carried sand across the valley, covering shapes, softening edges, turning pyramids into hills and plazas into shallow depressions. Locals saw nothing but land. Time disguised everything. Then archaeologists arrived with new methods: satellite mapping, soil sampling, excavation grids, and slowly the land began to wake up. A team uncovered the first pyramid, then the second, then the circular plaza, then staircases, walls, corridors. And with each layer brushed clean, something became unmistakably clear. This wasn't a collection of random structures. This was a city, an ancient city, and a sophisticated one. The first mystery was the layout. Caral isn't chaotic, it's planned. 6 major pyramids stand like anchors, with dozens of smaller structures arranged in deliberate symmetry. The design follows a hierarchy: large ceremonial complexes in the center, administrative and residential buildings farther out. Everything is placed with intention, as though the builders had a blueprint, which they couldn't have had, not without writing. And that's one of the things that makes Caral so disturbing. A civilization this complex left behind absolutely no writing. Not a single symbol that could be called an alphabet. No carved instructions. No record of rulers, battles, harvests, or rituals. Nothing. But they left their mathematics. Look closely at Caral's pyramids, and you see ratios. Consistent, repeating ratios. The terraces follow proportional patterns. The staircases match angular designs that repeat across the site. Some structures align with the solstices. Others align with geographic features. These people were observing the sun, watching horizon shifts, measuring shadows. They were tracking time long before clocks existed. How do we know? Because the alignments still work. When the summer solstice sun rises, it strikes the face of one pyramid almost perfectly. When the winter solstice arrives, a different structure lines up with the sunset. That kind of precision isn't luck. It's observation recorded through architecture. Which brings us to the next mystery. How do you plan an entire city without writing anything down? There's one answer: memory. Oral transmission. Generational learning. A type of knowledge passed from expert to apprentice, repeated until it becomes a shared language without needing symbols. The city itself becomes the notebook. But if that's the case, what happened to the teachers when the city was abandoned? Why does no later culture show their exact techniques? Why do so many of their methods seem to just vanish? Before we ask that, we need to understand what Caral achieved. Start with the foundations. Under several pyramids, researchers found shikras, large woven bags filled with stones. They weren't decorative, they were functional. When modern engineers studied them, they realized the shikras worked like earthquake shock absorbers. The stones inside the bags shift, absorbing seismic energy, preventing the structure above from collapsing. Thousands of years before steel-reinforced buildings, the Caral civilization invented base isolation. This isn't speculation. Seismic engineers tested reconstructions of the foundations and confirmed their functionality. The ancient builders understood the physics, whether through long-term observation or intuition, and applied it with precision. They weren't lucky, they were good. Now consider the sound engineering. Caral contains a sunken circular plaza with acoustics so precise that a person speaking in the center can be heard clearly around the entire circumference. No microphones, no architectural software, just shape, angle, and physics. And placed near this plaza were bone flutes tuned to specific frequencies. These weren't random instruments. They matched the resonant sound range of the space. The people who built Caral didn't just design structures. They designed experiences, ceremonies, acoustic events. They used vibrations intentionally. Most ancient civilizations explored music. Caral engineered it. And their engineering extended into environmental control. Ventilation shafts bring wind into inner chambers. Airflow channels regulate temperature. Thicker walls insulate the interiors from heat. Every piece of architecture shows awareness of the environment. Nothing fights nature. Everything collaborates with it. The more you study Caral, the more the logic becomes overwhelming. This wasn't a tribe. This wasn't a village. This wasn't a lucky accident. It was a scientific community 5,000 years ahead of schedule. And we haven't even touched the trade network. Archaeologists found shells from Ecuador and plant remains from the Andes highlands. Caral exported cotton for nets, which coastal fishermen used to catch more fish, which they then traded back. This created an economic loop, a sustainable cycle that kept both groups thriving. There is no evidence of war, no fortifications, no weapons, no bodies with trauma. Caral developed a stable, peaceful economy at a time when nearly every other emerging civilization relied on conflict and domination. If that doesn't break the historical narrative, nothing will. Now let's look at something equally baffling: the absence of graves. There are very few burials, and none that indicate elite rulers. No golden tombs, no monumental burial chambers. If leaders existed, they didn't build tombs for themselves. Authority in Caral appears distributed. Rituals were collective. Power wasn't concentrated in a single figure. A civilization advanced enough to build pyramids with no kings, no queens, no god rulers carved into stone. That alone is shocking. But it also explains why they could abandon the city peacefully, no centralized figure forcing them to stay. So what happened to them? Climate changed. The rivers dried. Farming failed. When the environment collapsed, Caral had no choice. They didn't die off, they migrated. DNA studies show movement toward the Andes, toward other pre-Columbian cultures. But here's the haunting part. Much of their knowledge didn't migrate with them. Without writing, ideas evaporated. Techniques disappeared. Within generations, the descendants of Caral no longer understood the full sophistication of their ancestors. Imagine a world where all digital data vanishes. No internet, no books, just memories. How long would modern engineering last? How long before skyscrapers become myths? Before complex science fades? Caral lived that reality. Yet the structures remained. They waited under dirt, dust, sand. When the world rediscovered them, it wasn't because of myth or legend. It was because the evidence refused to stay buried any longer. A scientific expedition dating organic material revealed the impossible. Caral's age pushed back the timeline for civilization in the Americas by nearly 2,000 years. Suddenly, history books had to grow older. Civilizations thought to be the first were no longer first. Caral didn't just appear early. It appeared fully formed, with architecture, astronomy, economy, engineering, and trade already mature. That means something happened before Caral, something we haven't found yet. Because a civilization doesn't start with pyramids. It builds up to them. So where are the earlier stages? The smaller sites, the experimental structures, the prototypes. The desert is silent on that. But there's more evidence that Caral wasn't alone. It was part of a larger network of early Andean cultures. Similar architectural patterns appear in places hundreds of kilometers away. Not identical, but related, like dialects of the same language. And if that's true, then Caral wasn't merely a city. It was the center of something bigger. Something like a regional knowledge hub. We often imagine ancient civilizations as primitive, slow, lacking precision. But Caral is the opposite. Measured, calculated, intentional. When you walk through the ruins today, the desert wind moving across the stone feels almost like an echo of the minds that built it. There's a sense of clarity, as if every structure was placed to teach something. The pyramids aren't tombs. They don't hide bodies. They don't glorify rulers. They serve a different purpose: ritual, observation, community, stability. They are instruments, not monuments. Caral's power lies in its logic. Landscape analysis shows they selected the site because it offered natural protection from flooding. The rivers carved predictable paths. The elevated platforms shielded structures from seasonal changes. The environment wasn't an obstacle. It was a tool, a partner. Caral's builders understood the land intimately. Another scientific detail: the fiber used in construction ropes came from specific cotton species grown intentionally for durability. They cultivated strength. They engineered reliability. No myths required. One of the most puzzling discoveries came from thermal imaging. Researchers noticed heat patterns remaining longer in certain parts of the pyramids, suggesting hidden chambers. Some are still unexcavated. The desert has more secrets, waiting for tools advanced enough to uncover them without damage. Every new scan reveals something unexpected. New walls, buried platforms, forgotten staircases. Caral isn't a completed puzzle. It's a puzzle unfolding in real time. The question isn't whether Caral was advanced. It's why we ever assumed ancient people weren't capable of brilliance. Why we think intelligence is modern. Caral is evidence that early humans observed, experimented, tested, and built with logical precision. They didn't rely on iron or bronze. They used what they had: stone, reed, cotton, sound, wind, sun. They solved problems with creativity instead of tools, and that might be the most advanced trait of all. Caral shows what humanity looks like when curiosity is the driving force, when civilization grows from cooperation instead of domination, when architecture responds to the environment instead of resisting it. It's not just an ancient city, it's an ancient idea that progress doesn't require violence, that science can grow from simplicity, that intelligence can emerge anywhere people are willing to watch the world closely. And perhaps the greatest truth Caral offers is this: history is incomplete, not because people didn't build great things, but because nature hides them. The desert preserved Caral. Forests, rivers, oceans, those environments erase. For every Caral uncovered, there might be 10 lost forever. But Caral survived long enough to remind us of everything we underestimate, and everything we might lose again if we don't pay attention. When you look at the pyramids of Caral under the evening sun, the edges sharp despite their age, you realize the people who built them weren't primitive. They were scientists without lab coats, engineers without math textbooks, astronomers without telescopes, architects without blueprints. Their tools were observation, patience, memory, and a deep understanding of the natural world. They didn't need to carve their knowledge into stone. They carved it into the city itself. And in that quiet desert valley, where the wind carries the same patterns it carried 5,000 years ago, you can almost feel what they intended. A city that speaks through structure. A lesson written in geometry instead of ink. A reminder that intelligence is older than we think and far more fragile. Caral isn't just the past. It's a warning about the future. Knowledge fades. Cities fall. Civilizations disappear. But the curiosity that built Caral, that part of humanity, survives. The pyramids stand today because the people who built them believed that understanding the world mattered. They aligned their stones with the sun, with purpose. They shaped sound with intention. They engineered stability with reason. They left behind a story that took thousands of years to be heard again. And now that it's finally uncovered, it refuses to be forgotten. Caral leaves us with one final truth. The past is never as simple as we imagine. A civilization this old shouldn't have known the things it clearly understood. Yet the stones don't lie. They planned, observed, engineered, and adapted with a level of intelligence we are only now beginning to appreciate. And if Caral could exist for 5,000 years without leaving a single written word, it makes you wonder, what else is still buried out there? What other stories are waiting to surface? If you have theories, doubts, or your own ideas about Caral, share them in the comments. I'd love to hear how you interpret this ancient mystery. And if you enjoyed this journey, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.